Thank you very much, Chairman of CFCD, Ambassador Oyas, distinguished permanent representatives, distinguished delegates. I too want to join in the expressions of appreciation for the leadership of all the countries in the hemisphere in discussing, not only discussing, but also acting on issues with regard to disaster management, disaster risk reduction, and humanitarian efforts when natural hazards strike many countries in the Western Hemisphere. But specifically today, I want to recognize the leadership of Argentina for bringing this issue to putting it on the agenda of the Organization of American States, and the leadership which we have felt throughout the years from Ambassador Gabriel Fuchs from Argentina in all the time insisting on a more coordinated, cooperative effort with regard to humanitarian support to member states. And we look forward to working with Argentina as well as with all the other member states in establishing new mechanisms for disaster relief. But let me recognize also, Chairman, the collaboration that exists within the Inter-American system, between the Inter-American institutions, in this case specifically the Inter-American Development Bank, the Pan-American Health Organization, and the Pan-American Development Foundation. And you have mentioned the presence of John Sambreo and Christine Harridge from the Pan-American Development Foundation, but also Dr. Jean-Luc Poncelet, who has been in constant communication with us over the past couple of years, and now we have been able to establish a very strong relationship with the Pan American Health Organization anytime when hurricane strikes the hemisphere or other kinds of natural disasters. And it would be useful to hear at some point from Dr. Poncelet in terms of what is in place in terms of the immediate response which is being provided to member states. Many of you may not know about the emergency centers which are established immediately after such a disaster hit countries. I think it's useful to share that information. And lately and more intensively, we are very much engaged with the Inter-American Defense Board, and I'm very pleased to see the Lieutenant General Jose Mercado y Silva present here today. So that's the second layer, basically, of support which we receive with regard to natural disaster mitigation and risk reduction. And I know that today we will speak much more about humanitarian efforts and emergency relief. But there is also something which I need to share with you, distinguished representatives, is the division of labor in this regard within the Inter-American system. The Organization of American States, and we see representatives from the Department of Sustainable Development here, and the Inter-American Development Bank focus very strongly on disaster risk reduction strategies and disaster risk management and mitigation strategies in assisting countries in terms of technical assistance, building capacity, in terms of building codes and long-term assistance. So this is something which we have to include in our work when we establish the working group, although the working group is very much focused on short-term relief and humanitarian efforts. The Pan American Development Foundation and the Pan American Health Organization have established mechanisms for short-term emergency relief. And I think they're doing a great job in getting the diaspora involved and the private sector in the hemisphere. So we should recognize that there is already an existing division of labor on how to deal with natural disasters in the Western Hemisphere. And I'll come back to that in terms of how we could strengthen this collaborative effort. We also, and that is the Organization of American States together with all the other partners, work very closely with two other layers of action, basically, in the Western Hemisphere. One is the different specialized agencies in the Western Hemisphere, the specialized disaster mitigation or disaster management agencies in Central America, in South America, and in the Caribbean. CEDERA, CEPREDENAC, and others are very much engaged with us. And I think this is a layer which should not be underestimated in terms of what can be done. And I would hope that their perspectives, as they are on the ground in the regions, will be taken on board. But we work also with the national emergency agencies within countries. So we have different layers of collaboration already in place. And I think it's good to look at how we can strengthen that kind of collaboration. And I think that's a critical mandate for this committee. One thing which we have felt from experience over the past years in terms of policy making and dealing with the issue of natural risk management as a general term for risk reduction, short-term emergency relief, and natural risk mitigation, is that national emergency agencies often focus very strongly on, of course, what they are meant to do is a short-term emergency relief. But equally, it is important for countries to realize that it is important to continue working on the long-term mitigation strategies. And some countries have established specific agencies for this within countries, and in the office of the President or the Prime Minister. And I think it's important to indicate that here, that beyond emergency relief, beyond humanitarian assistance, it will be necessary for member states to include long-term risk reduction strategies, efforts in agencies or in the existing agencies. But this is an area which needs to be developed and further strengthened. Within the inter-American system overall, and we have discussed this on previous occasions earlier this year, we had a seminar on this, we have at least made some progress in terms of harmonizing different mechanisms and instruments which existed into one single entity. And I think in this case, I want to highlight two of them. One is the Inter-American Strategic Plan for Policy on Vulnerability Reduction, Risk Management and Disaster Response, the IASP, but as well the Inter-American Committee on Natural Risk Disaster Reduction, IACNDR. These are two mechanisms which exist and are available to member states to deal with coordination, with cooperation. And I think whatever new outcome there is, it should relate to these existing mechanisms and the subcommittees which exist in the context of these mechanisms. Then the second part is the Convention on the Inter-American Convention on Disaster Assistance to member states, to which regretfully not many countries have signed on to, and I would appeal at this point for member states to sign on to that. At this point, only 3 countries have ratified the instrument, but I think it would be very useful if member states would assist in having more countries becoming part of this Inter-American Convention. The third one is, of course, the financial mechanism, FUNDEM, which is, as I have indicated earlier, an issue that needs the full attention of member states, because since FUNDEM was established, while we did provide support to member states when emergency situations occurred, FUNDEM never had resources available to it to do that. So I think this is an area which we need to look at, and I hope that in the context of the working group, this could be part of the work. I wanted to share these with you because I think in the context of the working group and the mandate of the working group, it would be useful to keep all these elements in place that we have already harmonized, we have already mechanisms in place. We need to do much better in terms of coordination, and in this regard, very practical solutions to be found in terms of collaboration between member states, and practical, very concrete, for instance, in terms of transport, when there is a need for emergency relief. We have at this point one situation with regard to Guatemala where we need support to transport available resources to assist the people in Guatemala. We have the issue of customs and harmonization of how to deal with emergency relief efforts when they reach countries. We have the issue of coordination on the ground as well as the distribution of the goods so that it reaches the people for which it is meant to be, and all the other kinds of assistance where we need practical coordination. So I would hope, Mr. Chairman, that these issues will come up in the working group, and I can pledge the support of the Department of Sustainable Development as well as the General Secretary as a whole to support the working group and its chairman in making this a very useful mechanism of practical solutions to increase the efficiency, the effectiveness of emergency relief in the first place, humanitarian relief, but also in the long-term disaster risk mitigation and risk reduction. So thank you very much, and I look forward to working with you.